Good morning, ladies. I hope you're having a great day. Working from home today and just enjoying the sunshine and the birds. I want us to talk today about a little known lady. I call her an inconspicuous woman. We find her in 2 Samuel chapter 17. I guess you can tell I'm intrigued with the women of the Bible, so many of whom we know so little about. And so I wanted us to kind of look at this lady today and kind of be challenged by her. We have to kind of understand the context. So let me back up to chapter 15. And in that chapter, we read about Absalom's rebellion and attempt to overthrow David's throne. So what does David do? David asked his advisor Hushai to stay in Jerusalem and become an advisor to Absalom. But his main purpose was going to be to frustrate and counter Ahithophel's advice, who is the one that had been chosen by Absalom as an advisor. Now the priests are still in Jerusalem, Zadok and Abiathar, and it would be their sons, Ahimaaz and Jonathan, who would relay Hushai's messages directly to David. So, in chapter 16, we meet Shimei. Now remember, he's the man that comes out of the village while David and his men are fleeing and begins to curse David. And David's men want to kill him. But look at David's response in verses 11 and 12. My own son is trying to kill me. Doesn't this relative of Saul have even more reason to do so? So if you think of all the turmoil that's going on, and then we come to chapter 17. Ahithophel has devised a plan for Absalom so that his throne is established for himself. And it was a simple plan. It had two major points. The first one, sleep with the concubines your father left to take care of the palace. There were 10 of them. And then Ahithophel said, then Israel would know this insult to your father would leave no room for reconciliation. But then do you know what Ahithophel told him? You need to do this on the roof of the palace and have a tent erected where everyone can see it. That's in verse 22. Then the second part of the plan was, you need to choose 12,000 men right now and start out immediately to catch up with David. He's weary, he's discouraged, then you just kill David, your dad, and you can let everybody else go back home. Then, Absalom, you'll be at peace with all the people. That's the beginning of chapter 17. But look carefully, because it says, Absalom and the elders of Israel thought this was a good plan. But Absalom stops and he calls in Hushai and he asks his opinion. And Hushai tells Absalom in verse 7 of chapter 17, this time Ahithophel made a mistake. And so he gives his reasons. David and his men are mighty warriors. They're angry like a mother bear robbed of her cubs. David is an experienced man of war. He is not going to spend the night with his troops. He's going to be hiding. And then when David kills a few of your men, panic is going to break out. And word is going to spread that your men are being slaughtered. And so then Hushai offers a plan with two major points as well. Number one, mobilize the entire army of Israel. You're going to need more than 12,000. That would ensure your victory. And then he says to Absalom, lead the army yourself. Then David nor any of his men would escape. And you know what that did? that appealed to Absalom's pride, while inferring that Ahithophel's plan wasn't going to work. So then you read, now Absalom and all the men of Israel think Hushai's plan of attack is better than Ahithophel's. But there's a component in this event that is unknown to all of these men. Look at verse 14. The Lord had determined to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel, which really was the better plan, so he, being God, could bring disaster on Absalom. Ladies, God's at work even when we cannot see it. Even when we think he isn't at work, God is at work. Which then brings us to our verses for today, verses 15 to 22. And as I've studied this passage, I want to read to you out of the Amplified Bible today, and I'm going to stop periodically because this is just kind of unfolded like peeling an onion. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar the priest, this is the advice Ahithophel gave to Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is the advice I have given. So he's basically just recounting what you and I just talked about. Look at verse 16. Now then, send word quickly and tell David, do not spend the night in the fords on the west side of the Jordan in the wilderness, but by all means cross over to the east side of the river, or else the king and all the people with him will be destroyed if Ahithophel is allowed by Absalom to lead the attack. Verse 17, now Jonathan and Ahimaaz, the priest's sons, were staying at En-Rogel. That was a little spring in the Kidron Valley, less than a mile from Jerusalem, okay? So keep that in mind, because then the next section says, and a maidservant appearing to go for water would go tell them what was happening. Do you see this cover for the priest's sons? It would have been dangerous for them to be seen in Jerusalem. So the priest would tell the maidservants, who would tell their sons. And then what does it say? And they, being the priest's sons, would go secretly and inform King David, for they could not allow themselves to be seen in the city of Jerusalem. Why? We'll go back and read in the earlier 2 chapters. Absalom had stationed guards at every entrance to Jerusalem. He was strengthening his hold on the city. And thus, this elaborate plan of relaying messages was developed. But what happens? Well, look at the beginning of verse 18. But a boy saw them and told Absalom. So even though these priest's sons were being so careful, they had been spotted. What do they do next? It tells us in verse 18, the 2 of them left quickly and came to the house of a man in Bahurim, who had a well in his courtyard, and with his permission they went down to it. Bahurim is east of Jerusalem on the road that runs from Jerusalem to the Jordan River, and near the Mount of Olives. But it was also home to Shimei. Remember him? The guy that was cursing David that the men wanted to kill? Well, during this time frame, in this period of history, it was not uncommon for people to store harvested grain in a cistern or a dry well. But from this verse, it seems that there was no wall around it, that it was just hewn out of the ground. Because look at verse 19. And the woman of the house took a covering and spread it over the mouth of the well and scattered grain on it. So nothing was discovered. In my mind's eye, I see our Ivorian sisters taking their extra piece of panya that they wrap their babies with and spreading it out on the ground and then scattering grain. Now, we don't know what kind of material it was, but we know it was a common practice. She realized David's men were being pursued by Absalom's followers. So she just spread a cloth and then scattered her grain. That to the average person would appear normal. But do you see her attention to detail? The men just didn't go down in the well. She made a cover for them. Had the pursuers known that the men were in the well, they would have searched it thoroughly. But what does it say? Nothing was discovered. But look at verse 20. Then Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house and asked, "Where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan?" And the woman said to them, "They have crossed over the brook." Do you see what she's doing? Basically, she's telling Absalom's men, "I saw them, but they're long gone on their way across the brook." She was sending the searchers in the wrong direction. Does that sound reminiscent of another lady we've looked at in Joshua chapter 2 by the name of Rahab? So what do these men of Absalom do? If you keep reading in verse 20, it says, when they searched and couldn't find them, talking about the priest's son, they returned to Jerusalem. Verse 21 and 22. After they left, Jonathan and Ahimaaz came up out of the well and went and informed King David and said to David, "Arise and cross over the Jordan River quickly, for Ahithophel has advised an attack against you." Then David and all the people who were with him departed and crossed over the Jordan by daybreak. Not even one was left who had not crossed the Jordan River. So here is an inconspicuous, unnamed, faithful woman used in a simple act that was normal to her daily life. She helped save David, his army, and all of those in the kingdom of Israel that were with him through her simple act. She just covered the well with a cloth and scattered her grain like she would have done any other day to dry it in that hot desert sun. So as I read this and studied this week, my question to myself and my question to you is, when has any one of our simple acts been such a blessing to other people? You and I may never know. She did know. We may not. But we can let our lights shine brightly and point others to Jesus just by being faithful where he placed us. And then I thought about the New Testament when Jesus reminded people that when we give a cup of cold water in his name, we've done it unto him. Really? For us, a cup of cold water, but that can be a blessing to another person. So, I want us to think today, how is God using me and you where he placed us to serve him on a daily basis while living our lives, but seeking to be his hands and feet? That's what he wants of us. And what a blessed opportunity we have to serve him. Just in very practical, simple ways. May we be faithful doing exactly that. Father, help us to recognize needs, to do what you would have us do, not for fanfare and not for recognition, but just to be your hands and feet. May we be sensitive to that still, small voice when you speak to us as you spoke to Elijah. We love you. We're grateful for our salvation. Help us serve you well today. In Jesus' name, amen. Hope to see many of you at the convention come this weekend. We're excited about all that God's going to do while we get to gather back together. If you are not able to come, please go online and watch the various seminars and the main services and be blessed. We will also have some of our services and our seminars posted on our website after the convention. Have a great rest of the week.